We are taking up Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 17, and if possible, a couple of verses beyond that as well. Something very important comes up in verse 17. Sri Krishna says, that the self is the one by which, by the virtue of which, the world exists. And then he proceeds to say, this self is indestructible, avyaya. What is remarkable here is the total negation of any creating agency. It is by the self, due to the self, that the world exists. Not due to a creating God. And the nature of the world, the nature of the self, have to be very clearly understood. That understanding gives us a beautiful foundation on which the principles of life automatically arise. So, the world is due to Atma, the pure self, and the world is destructible, the self is not. How is it possible that something indestructible gives rise to something of a totally different nature? That the destructible proceeds from the indestructible, that the limited comes from the unlimited. And this is where Vedanta would ask, to whom, for whom? The self is without a second, so the self is to nobody but itself. There can be no perceiver or knower of the self. The self is unknowable because it is indivisible, non-dual, without a second, without a companion, without an observer, without a witness. So to whom is the self? To itself. And to whom is the world? The world is again to itself. It's just that the world exists as a pair of an observing entity and an observed phenomena. These two together comprise the world. Two are not needed to make the self. But the moment you say the world, you have pointed at two entities, the subject and the object. When it comes to the self, there is no subject, there is no object, or you could say that the subject itself is the object. So there is the world, and the world is to the observing ego. The self does not exist to the observing ego. The implication is that if something exists as an observation to the ego, it is the world, not the self. So in a moment of vain carelessness, if you find yourself staking a claim of some sort with respect to the self, you must know that if you are observing something, it is necessarily a part of the world, it cannot be the self. That which is vulnerable to be observed by the ego is definitely a part of the world. And the self is not a part of the world, it cannot be a part of anything. Only the world has parts. The self is the root of the world. We need to understand how the self is the root of the world and how from an indestructible root do all kinds of perishable names and forms arise. What is meant when we say that the world comes from the self? Please understand, the world is to the ego. And the ego, in its perception of itself, is an incomplete mass. We would better say an incomplete mess. And it is for the sake of completion that it keeps projecting an infinity in its field of observation. There is a reason why the observed universe needs to be infinite. It is because it is the infinite that the ego is looking for in the universe. Getting it? However, there is a fundamental problem in the approach of the ego. The ego is assuming the infinity to lie outside of itself. And on this assumption stands the logic of an infinite search in an infinite universe. It is this fundamental mistake that reflects as the dissonance between the nature of the self and the nature of the world. Anything that the ego projects will carry the characteristics of the ego. Right? It may not be the same as the projector, but will indeed carry the characteristics. If your hand has 5 fingers, your shadow will show the same 5 fingers. Yes, the length might be extended, dimensions and angles and proportions might change, but the number won't turn to 6. Similarly, the incompleteness of the ego shows up in the world that it projects outside of itself. Therefore, the world has to be incomplete, which means finite, which means limited, which means destructible. It is because the world is to the ego that the world will necessarily be destructible. And because the ego is destructible, for this very reason, it is projecting a universe in which to search for immortality. But your projection can have shape, size, form, name different from yours, but it cannot have stuff that is different from your own. Therefore, the world is made of much the same stuff as the projecting ego. What is the stuff of the projecting ego? Nothing. It is hollow. It is this hollowness that it wants to fill up by projecting huge hollowness outside of itself. The same hollowness we often call as incompleteness. That is the stuff of the ego. Are you getting it? So you see, searching for the self, the great self, Atma, the ego gives rise to its world. This is very, very different from the concept of a creator God. Vedanta does not admit that. What is the world? Where did the world come from? It came from the ego. No, it did not descend from the heavens. No, nobody made it. It is being made all the time. With time, the world is continuously a work in progress. Nobody ever made it in some particular final form. You make it. So the world is a choice. In Vedanta, the world is a choice. The world is as you create it. Who is the creator of the world? You are. Now that's a lot of power. And with that comes a lot of responsibility. Who created the world? You did. You did. And you are already the indestructible, just that you have forgotten it. Your forgetfulness sits atop your real nature. And it is from the forgetfulness that the world springs. Does the world come from who you really are? No. The world comes from forgetting who you really are. So there is you, and you are shrouded totally by forgetfulness. This forgetfulness is the world. What is the nature of forgetfulness? By definition, you have said, I forgot something, which means there is something missing. So, the nature of the ego is incompleteness. It keeps on missing something. The ego is a forgetfulness. You have forgotten who you are. And since you have forgotten who you are and where you lost yourself, you start looking in the opposite direction. You start searching for yourself in all the time, space, expanse available to you. Not available, projected. Are you getting it? Now, why do I say that this is a very important thing to be understood? Because with the concept of a creator God comes the concept of a true universe. If I hold myself to be true, then whatsoever I create will be true. No? You cannot say the potter is true but the pot is not. The pot came from the hands of the potter. They will be in the same dimension. So if you believe in a world created by God, then you have turned the world into your God. Because God is supposed to be true. And if God is truth, the world too must be true. And if the world is true, then there is no harm in devoting your life to the pursuit of worldly objects. No? After all, the world is something godly. It came straight from God, the truth. If the world is coming straight from God, the truth, how can it be a problem to be materialistic? Do you see how materialism flows directly from creationism? If the world has been created by the highest truth, then how can you blame me for taking the world itself as something quite high? Instead, Vedanta penetrates the world, understands the world, does not worship the world. Vedanta is about liberation, freedom from the world. The world comes from the ego, and the ego is a mere forgetfulness. Whatsoever is in the world is to the ego. And the ego is just like a person who has been hit so hard he has lost his identity. Are you getting it? No point pursuing the world. No point quoting the laws of Prakriti. In defense of your addiction towards objects. Please understand, if the world is coming from God, then the laws of Prakriti are sacred. Are they not? Because God is sacred. God is truth, so the world must be the truth. God is sacred, so the laws of Prakriti must be sacred. And in Prakriti you find all kinds of things. Envy, hatred, possessiveness. Then everything can be justified because everything is coming from God. Why do you have 10 kids in this age of biodiversity extinction? because God sent them down. Have you not heard that? No, that's not just some idiot's quip. That's the product of a flawed philosophy. When the philosophy is that whatsoever happens in the world is mandated by some omnipotent God up there, then anything is justifiable, no? I didn't do it. Who did it? God did it. You could be the worst kind of scoundrel, and after every act of lunacy, you could scream, "Oh my God, what have you done?" Vedanta does not recognize any agency or authority outside of you. If something happened, you are responsible. You cannot say, but these things are natural. Why are you so addicted to something? Why do you want to possess that person? But is not this feeling very natural? Please understand what the argument is based on. When you say something is natural, what you mean is that it exists in the world in a very primordial form since ancient times. And since it exists in the world since very long, therefore its existence even within me is justified. Vedanta does not admit that. You are the self. You don't even lack understanding. In some way, you just have to remember. You don't even need to be told a lot. You just need to remember. It's very interesting. The words remember and religion both begin with re. And both imply much the same. Going back. Remembering in its purest form would mean rejoining. What does it mean to dismember? Split. Cleave apart. That is what is meant by dismembering. In that sense, what does remember mean? Bring together. Rejoin. And this rejoining is also the meaning of the word religion. So Vedanta, in that sense, is a religion. It says you have forgotten something. Come on. See. And you will remember. If you just see what's going on, you will remember the base, the truth, the foundation, the original, the source. Are you getting it? It begins with the ego that takes itself to be destructible. It's an assumption. Where does the destructive nature of the world comes from? It comes from nowhere. It is an assumption. And because the ego assumes itself to be destructible, it projects a destructible universe. That's all. Assumptions are needed only when you have forgotten the truth. If you know, you don't need to assume. Whatsoever is being told to Arjun is just an attempt in some way to invoke an ancient memory. not memory of the ordinary kind. You understand the sense in which we are using the word memory, right? In this invocation, the emphasis is on unlearning. You knew, but something else, an assumption, a very heavy assumption, is now sitting on the top of the knowing. Hence, the method of Vedanta is that of decluttering, cleansing, not addition but removal. You are assuming something, the assumption has to be cleared away. And how is the assumption to be cleared away? By looking at the implications of the assumption. The ego assumes something. What is the implication of that assumption? The world. The world is the result of the ego's assumptions. One step further, what is the implication of the world? Sorrow. Therefore, the method of Vedanta is to watch the world in context of one's own sorrow. Watch the world, watch yourself, and you will see how false both of these are. You will see that there has to be something fundamentally wrong in what you are assuming. Hence, Vedanta places a lot of emphasis on facts, because facts are all that you can watch. Watch the facts, and there is no way your assumptions can still stand. How else will you know assumption as assumption? Tally it with the fact. See whether these two can be reconciled, and no reconciliation is really possible. Between what you observe and what you assume, no handshake is possible. You think of yourself as something. Look at your actions, your thoughts, your deeds, your feelings, your relationships, your debits, your credits, fears, your hopes, and see whether they agree with the assumption you hold of yourself. There can be no agreement. And when facts do not agree with assumptions, it is the assumptions that must kneel down. Now you see why Adi Shankaracharya had to say Jagan Mithya. Because the world is a product of your assumption. In what way is the world a product of my assumption? You take the world for what it is not. Otherwise, you couldn't have been so smitten by it. If you are searching for the absolute in the world, and is there anybody here who does not want the absolute? How much peace do you want? Absolute peace. How much trust and loyalty do you want? How much goodness and welfare do you want? So you look for these things in the world, searching for the absolute in the world. Do you see that you are assuming the world to be absolute? Now, this is the sense in which the world is false. The world is relative to who you are. But you are searching for the absolute in the world. In that sense, the world is false. You are assuming a fundamental difference, a dimensional difference between who you are and what the world is. Such a difference does not exist. That's where the world is false. Are you getting it? Please see Sri Krishna very clearly negating the truthfulness of the world. And the moment you negate the truthfulness of the world, the concept of God goes out of the window. Because if the world is false, what do you need a God for? So theism in Vedanta refers to unconditional love for the truth. What is Vedantic theism? Devotion towards the truth, not belief in God. In fact, any kind of belief is atheistic behavior in light of Vedanta. If you are a believer, you are an atheist. The nature of the self is truth, realization, understanding, bodh. What do you need beliefs for? If you are someone living in beliefs, you are Nastik. You are an atheist. Please understand, Vedanta is not about God, it is about Satya, truth. If you want to call the truth as God to please your habits, that is okay. That's fine. But then not a creator God. Not a God who said, now the mountains must come up and now the rivers must flow and now the stars must shine. No God of that kind. Are you getting it? And that will also tell you why Vedanta has always been for the select few. The elite even among the spiritually advanced ones. Because it places tremendous responsibility upon you. It does not allow you to get away by using the God excuse. What could I do? God willed it. No. Will is something exclusive to you. There is you, there is Prakriti, and Prakriti is absolutely secular. Secular in terms of having no inclinations, no prejudices, no favorites, no will. That's Prakriti. Do not say, oh, it just happened for some reason. No. Vedanta won't let you escape with that. If something is happening, you have a choice. You have a choice. To make it sharper. If something is happening to you, you have a choice. This will help us understand better. If something is happening to you, you have a choice. Who are you? No, you are not the material body. The Vedanta does not define you as the organism. Fundamentals. It defines you as consciousness. You are not the organism. Had you been the organism, the concept of choice would stand vitiated. Because much can happen to the organism outside his will. You're not the organism. You are consciousness. And whatsoever happens to consciousness is within the purview of choice and will. Things can happen to the body, to the world, randomly. But if something happens to you randomly, then it is just your forgetfulness still playing out. Also, because the ego is forgetfulness itself, therefore the ego has a stake in resisting the removal of forgetfulness. So, for example, if you choose to fall asleep with the body, the choice is not random. The choice is full of malice and mischief. You very well know that if you do not fall asleep, you will have to put aside your forgetfulness, and that would make you responsible and accountable. Therefore, you choose to drift along with the body. The body is trying to fall asleep, and you play along. You say, fine. You say you are sleepy, I am game. Along with you, I too will fall asleep. Because if I do not fall asleep at this moment, I'll have to own up. I'll have to become accountable and responsible. Also, since my very name is forgetfulness, if I choose to remember, then I am dead. If the ego is forgetfulness and the forgetfulness disappears, what happens to the ego? The ego is gone. So, for its self-preservation, the ego plays all kinds of dirty games. It's a mass of lies, extending itself all the time. To protect, justify, validate one lie, it comes up with 5 others. One lie gives rise to 5 more lies, and so on. Therein comes the concept of liberation and immortality in Vedanta. Everything in the world is perishable. And if you can be someone, that consciousness which remains untouched by the world which is perishable, then who are you? The imperishable. And that is immortality. I assumed I am incomplete. Therefore, I projected a universe full of incompleteness. And I started defining myself with respect to the universe. Now, if I can cut asunder the cords of that relationship, the basis of that definition, then am I still tied to the perishable? And if I am no more tied to the perishable, who am I? So that's the concept of immortality in Vedanta. Not being dependent on the mortal is immortality. In the next verse, Sri Krishna says, these bodies that are there in front of you, Arjun, they aren't immortal, nor are they indeterminable, agochar. They are all very destructible. So don't be so upset or attached. Just fight. What is the concept here? The concept is, you have to put the highest value on the highest. At this moment, your highest priority is the bodies in front of you. the people you don't want to fight for the fear of killing them. The highest priority has to go to the truth. And if the truth requires a particular kind of action, nothing must come in the way. You are treating these people, these bodies, these kin of yours, as if they are the truth. You are placing the highest value on them. But they are all destructible. So they cannot be the truth. The truth is, by definition, indestructible. Then what you are doing is a misplacement. You are putting something at the wrong place. You are putting highest value at a place where it does not belong. And in that you will be violating who you really are. Your own essence is the highest truth. If you instead take something else as the highest, you will be guilty of the worst kind of violation. So, see this universe and the objects in it, the people in it, for what they really are. None of them is supreme. Nothing here is inviolable. Nothing here is indestructible. Nothing here is non-negotiable. Nothing here is absolute. Which means that for the sake of the absolute, everything here is disposable. Dispense them off, Arjun. Are you getting it? The law of total ownership and total responsibility. The law of absolute dignity. The law of complete sovereignty. There is no truth in anything that I see outside of myself. Why do I need to bow down? I am the one, potentially. And I suffer exactly because I do not realize my potential. Instead of the omnipotent, I live and sleep and doze and snooze as some dirty insect. How can I avoid sorrow? And then I wonder where my sorrow comes from. It comes from my moment-to-moment choices. Everything that I do as a little insect just piles up more sorrow on me. Because a little insect I am not. Just for a sake of little convenience, I choose to behave as one. There are rats in this room. Do you blame them for not being attentive to the Gita? That's the reason why we turn into rats. Nobody blames a rat for not listening to the Gita. And therefore we choose to live like rats. Now there is no responsibility to listen to the Gita. I am a rat. Vedanta isn't music. A gymnasium where you come to lose flap. Hmm?